the FBI has reopened an investigation into the 2022 SCOTUS leak regarding the Dobbs decision that eventually removed constitutional protections for abortion rights and kicked that decision to the states. The investigation has already revealed some interesting and maybe hopeful insights into Justice Amy Coney Barrett's thinking. And I say maybe hopeful because Barrett, who you might remember was appointed to Trump in the last few months of his first term, well, she was confirmed to the Supreme Court just about a week before the 2020 election, which would see Trump eventually voted out of office. And at the time, she was seen to be an incredibly weak choice for a Supreme Court justice. There was talk that she was in a strange Christian-based cult, but that aside, she simply didn't have the experience behind her that you would expect from someone appointed to the highest court in the land. But Trump never appointed her for her experience. He appointed her because she was believed to be a highly conservative woman, the perfect person to fill the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg seat on the bench and the perfect person to overturn Roe v. Wade. So in ramming her confirmation through Congress as he was on his way out of office, Trump fulfilled a promise to his supporters that abortion would no longer be a protected right for Americans at the federal level. So once Barrett was appointed, it was only a matter of time before the decision came down to the people, but it would be 2 years before that day would come. In the meantime, there was still plenty of debate around the issue and some barely flickering hope that the now very conservative-leaning court would actually do its job and serve the American people, not the Republican agenda. There was a small possibility that the judges would see how widely popular abortion rights were among Americans, or how devastating the health implications of eliminating rights to abortion would be, or how many physicians would find it difficult to actually do their jobs under this kind of government scrutiny, or how obviously religious and non-secular the anti-abortion movement is. But then in 2022, the leak came, and that leak confirmed what we all sort of knew was inevitable, even though we didn't want to admit it, that the court would be overturning Roe v. Wade. So 3 years later, the pro-abortion and pro-women's health movement are still raging, but there has been little real progress as far as getting back the rights that have been lost. However, in the years since her confirmation, Barrett has proven to be less reliably right-wing than she was expected to be.
Did I understand you correctly to tell Justice Kagan that the government wanted to reserve its right to maybe not follow a Second Circuit precedent, say, in New York, because you might disagree with the opinion?
Our general practice is to respect those precedents, but there are circumstances when it is not a categorical practice. It is, and that is not
this administration's practice or the longstanding practice of the federal government. And I'm not talking about in the Fourth Circuit, are you going to respect a Second Circuit? I'm talking about within the Second Circuit. And can you say, is that this administration's practice or a longstanding one?
As I understand it, longstanding policy of the Department of Justice. Yes, that we generally, as it was phrased to me, generally respect circuit precedent, but not necessarily in every case. And some examples might be a situation where we're litigating to try and get that circuit precedent overruled and so forth.
Well, okay, so I'm not talking about a situation in which, the Second Circuit has a case from 1955 and you think it's time for it to be challenged. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in this kind of situation. I'm talking about this week, the Second Circuit holds that the executive order is unconstitutional, and then what do you do the next day or the next week?
Generally, we follow those.
So you're still saying generally?
Yes.
The right has all but turned on her for her demonstrated willingness to side with the more liberal judges. They call her the DEI justice, whereas other conservative judges are little more than predictably partisan seat fillers. They are hardly the highest and the brightest or the most ethical legal minds in the country. Recently, it's been revealed that prior to the Dobbs decision, in an internal vote among the justices, Barrett actually opposed taking up the case at all, which is interesting because that case was basically the reason why she was appointed to the court in the first place, and she knew that. The other conservative judges decided to hear the case anyway, assuming that once Barrett was forced to issue a judgment that she would rule against abortion rights, and ultimately they were right and she did. But while Barrett might be personally conservative in her views, she is a staunch constitutionalist, which is likely the reason why she's opposed Trump and his agenda as often as she has. For instance, while she was a professor at the University of Notre Dame, she was known to tell her students that the U.S. has bound itself to the Constitution the way Odysseus tied himself to the mast of his ship to resist the call of political sirens. So you may be wondering, what does any of this matter, especially in the realm of abortion rights and women's health care? She's already done the thing that we didn't want her to do. But overall, the Supreme Court is meant to be an independent body of government. And I know it's easy to forget that sometimes, especially now when we have such a partisan court that is overwhelmingly conservative and that so often rules against the will of the people and even against what seems to be protected by the Constitution. That's not even to mention the blatant corruption that has taken hold of the court, with several of the judges unabashedly engaged in conflicted interests and bribery. Barrett has, strangely enough, emerged from the court as a small but significant reminder that there are those in positions of power, even people who are supposedly on the right wing of our American politics, who are willing to stand up against Trump and his agenda. Apparently, there is a line too far when it comes to Trump. It just took us way, way too long to find it, and the line was much further out than most of us would have liked to have seen. And look, I don't want to give her too much credit, okay? She did vote, for example, to give Trump full immunity as though he were a king in this land, truly above the law, above consequence, above retribution. She also, along with her conservative colleagues on the bench, set us up in this country for the worst of Trumpism, a lot of which we are currently seeing on full display. Perhaps they're slowly beginning to understand the breadth of that decision, but these are the highest and brightest legal minds in the country. They are represented by the balanced scales of justice. If so many of us could foresee the disastrous results of their decision, then why couldn't they? But then there are other instances where the court has opposed Trump in a way that we are all very grateful for. And the court is in a position to actually do something about the monster that they've helped to create. It'll be difficult though, okay? Dr. Frankenstein could barely control his own monster, and that so-called monster had more empathy and love in his heart than what we've seen from Donald Trump. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, you probably have never read the book. You should though. It's a great book. You should read it if you haven't. But back to Trump, he's recently taking to issuing executive orders to expand his own power, and whenever courts rule against him, including the Supreme Court, he doesn't even seem to notice. I think the only thing keeping me sane these days is the feeling that the current state of things is simply unsustainable. We cannot keep going the way we've been going for the past few months or even for the past 10 years. The division in this country is feeling a little bit tired. The inflammatory rhetoric and headlines are exhausting. The idiocy of government officials telling us things that we can see for ourselves are simply untrue. Trump's playbook is getting stale. And millions of people who protested in the streets against Trump was no fluke. And that's not to mention the potentially millions more who supported the protests from their homes or from their cars. The incredible opposition to his policies and their executions, including from members of his own party, including from his own MAGA supporters, is etched in our nation's annals as it repeatedly hits historic lows. I don't know what the outcome of all this is going to be. Whatever happens next, in my own wildest imagination, will be unprecedented to say the least. But something's got to give somewhere. Of course, we've all felt this way before, I'm sure, but we've never had to foot a bill worth tens of millions of dollars for a vanity presidential birthday military parade after thousands of us were just fired from our jobs by the same government that keeps telling us there's not enough money in the budget for our health care or our food stamps. Please make it make sense, all right? That's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.